Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Panel by Panel podcast here on Parallel Panels. Here's a few things you should know about this podcast if this is your very first time listening to us. It's available on YouTube and Spotify, so if you're checking it out on one but another platform works for you better, go check it out on there under the same name. You can follow us on all of our social medias, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, all that good stuff, TikTok, at Parallel Panels, where we put out stuff about the episodes and some other cool like news content, YouTube videos, just fun content in general, so please go follow us across all of those platforms. You should also know what the podcast is. Every single episode, I have a read-through or a reread-through of an iconic comic book storyline from the past and do my best to explain it to my friend Aaron, who has very little experience in comic books, but we are a few episodes in now, so his knowledge is starting to get a bit higher up there in terms of certain characters and storylines and things like that. But today we are doing a new character that we have not done before, but Aaron does have a decent amount of experience with this world already because of its Netflix counterpart. We're of course talking about Neil Gaiman's The Sandman. In this episode we just do the first book, Preludes and Nocturnes, the first 8 issues or so, which is about the first half of the series on Netflix if you have watched it already. We decided to push this one forward because Aaron told me he had just finished the series, so it felt like a good time to do it, and we're going to follow up with the second book of The Sandman in the coming episodes, so to kind of wrap up that first season of the show. I do recommend that you watch the series first. We do talk a lot about the series, obviously because the first book of The Sandman only takes up about half of the season. We don't spoil the second half of the season and kind of some of the bigger plot elements. This first book of Sandman is really setting the scene, but if you do not want anything in the show spoiled for you, then go and check that out first. And also pick up a copy of The Sandman if you've only watched the show, because as we talk about, the book in its own right is absolutely incredible, as is the series, in my opinion. Without further ado, this is the Panel by Panel episode on the very first book of Neil Gaiman's epic book series, The Sandman. I bought the first B.O.B. album. I don't know if I've ever told you that.
That's dumb.
Wait, I wonder if I still have it.
You do not still have a B.O.B. album.
My mum would allow that to stay in her CD collection. No, I don't think it is.
Who are you going to pawn?
I think I might have sold it.
To who? How much are you getting for a B.O.B. album?
Hey, look, lad, nothing but hits.
That didn't even have magic on at that point.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, that was on.
Wait, that was the first album.
That was on the first one, and Aeroplanes, and Nothing on You.
What did he do after that?
He really fell off. I don't know a single song that he did after that. At least his own songs. I know some ones that he's featured on, but I don't know any of his own songs that came after that album.
No, Magic was on an album after.
No, it was definitely on that album.
Oh, or you didn't have his first album.
I had the one where he's like doing a superhero pose on the front.
Yeah,
you had the first one.
No, he had like.
Well, that was the album he became big anyway.
He had 5 before that.
What? I thought Nothing on You was like his first like. I mean, it was definitely his first big song.
Look at this! Look at this cover. He's in the clouds.
Wow,
that looks like he's dead.
Fear Factor intro is the first track.
He has a song called Bob and Joe. Double Bubble. Bob checking in. Nice. No, but yeah, B.O.B. presents The Adventures of Bobby Ray is the big one.
Yeah, that's the one I had.
Nothing on You, Airplanes. That has Airplanes Part 2 on it as well.
Yeah. Good album.
He must have. He did a song, for some reason it features Morgan Freeman. That confuses me.
Yeah.
Who's the one that did a song with Ryan Tedder? Remember that song?
No, I don't recognise the name.
I swear he did. He did Written in the Stars, right? What?
Eric Turner.
Oh. No. I got the wrong guy.
Fair enough. Also, just through looking through my mum's CD catalogue, which I should say, she does listen to these episodes. She's real behind. So in about 3 months, she'll be like, why are you calling me out live on a podcast for? But she owns 3 feeder albums.
They have 3 albums?
One of them is Greatest Hits, given. But
so she owns basically like 2.
But even still.
But even then, feeder probably have like 2 songs, right?
They got
Just a Day.
And Buck Rogers.
And Buck Rogers.
I mean, I like more feeder songs than that, but that's because I grew up with my mum and dad both playing feeder quite a lot.
What's your favourite feeder song?
I mean, it's probably Just a Day, but that's beside the point.
That isn't one of those.
There's a song called Just the Way I'm Feeling that's pretty good.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't exist. That Greatest Albums. There's 2 albums that she has.
Yeah.
One that has Just a Day, and that's it.
I think all of the hits are on one.
Oh. Well, how's on the second one?
I don't know. I could be wrong. I don't know how many feeder albums there are. There's probably a lot, I would imagine, because they're still going, so they've probably got a lot of albums.
So you could guess. I've only purchased like 3 albums in my life. One of them was Hybrid Theory.
Yeah, I was going to say that would have been my first guess.
One was the Disturbed album, with Down the Sickness on.
Oh, The Sickness.
There you go. And then I think the other one I bought was Recovery by Eminem. Because everyone was banging to that in the day.
My mum's got a few Eminem albums. I mean, given that some of them are probably mine. Well, I say some of them are probably
What was the big
They're
Recovery
mine.
song? Was it
Recovery?
Not
Afraid.
That's the one.
Love the Way You Lie.
Not Afraid was the big one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Was Doctor on that album? Or was that the album after?
Yeah. I think it might be the one before, actually. But yeah, I mean, like, my mum has some albums that I've bought which have just stayed in here for a long time. But, saying that, it is my contribution that Eminem Curtain Call was in there, which, I mean, it's greatest hits, bangers, and the Marshall Mathers LP2, not greatest hits. That's not so good. My mum bought that for me for my birthday.
That had Berserk on, though.
That's a banger.
That's about it.
But she owns the first Marshall Mathers LP, which is like Eminem's best album. So she owns the best Eminem album out of anyone in the house.
I'd say that's controversial. I'd say Curtain Call's better.
That's beside the point.
Sure.
I don't have a funny story to. I mean, we started talking about B.O.B.
Have you got the? You ain't got the app.
No, but
Oh.
I was going to show you this the other day, and I thought I'll save it for the podcast. But it's not really enough for a whole story, so I'm glad that we've started by talking nonsense about B.O.B. because this means this can just fill a minute because there's not much to it. Just 2 funny things that made me laugh whilst I was looking for jobs the other day.
Right.
Sometimes it really makes me laugh the way that job descriptions are worded, and this is a real good example of it. So I screenshotted it for this. First of all, the job was for fettlers. I don't know what that means.
Fettler. That's someone who just deals with like metalwork, right?
That's what I figured. But first of all, one of the training points is fillet and butt welds, which I'm sorry, you can't put those 2 words together and expect me not to laugh. But also, I still can't believe it says this. Rewards and benefits, right? Your annual leave, cycle to work, death in service.
Oh.
Which I know what that means, but also that's the only way. I've never seen it worded like that.
See, the thing that I'm mostly looking at is that they leave it up to the imagination, that last one. Bonus scheme. What does that mean? I don't know. You'll have to. Hopefully, you get the job. You'll know about the bonus scheme.
It's so blunt for them to not be like death in service and then elaborate like compensation pay, things like that. It just says that one of the benefits is death in service.
Yeah, that makes you just think that, okay,
you're like, whoa.
My benefit of taking this job is I might die.
I still applied.
Well, there you go.
So they got me, I guess. We were going to do Flash today, and in an attempt to try and put it off as long as possible. Well, no, this came about because you said about you finished the Sandman series the other day, and I thought we should probably... I didn't plan to do Sandman this early, but then when the series came out, it was like, it's kind of relevant. The only issue is that the Sandman series is the first 2 books of Sandman, but there is way too much to talk about in the first book. So we're going to do the second part in another episode. Like, we will do it book by book. It's just the series, like, melds them together. Like, the book that I have melds the first 2 together as well.
Right.
So that is basically... There's a bit added on, which is like an additional story, but that is basically the first season of the Sandman in book form. So we're only going to cover about half of it, right? Which in the series works out about half.
Everyone looks a lot funnier in this than the series.
Yeah. So we should talk about Sandman, like the actual book first. But we're going to like constantly reference the series. I mean,
first question before we move on is there is a episode 11 for people who haven't watched Sandman. It's a Neil Gaiman book, well, visual novel, I guess you'd call it, because Neil Gaiman normally just writes normal. He
does
books,
all kinds of stuff, yeah.
but he just does everything. And the series came out, what was it, late August, early September, I think it was.
Yeah, I can't really remember actually.
And the thing watching it, which I love, and I know basically all our viewers are British, so it's fine to say, but wow, there is a lot of good British actors. I forgot about so many of them.
Yeah.
And there's episode 11, which is nothing really to do with the rest of the series at all. There's an animated little skit at the start, where it's talking about basically a cat and all about the Sandman. And then basically what that cat wants. And then there's a bit after, which... Do you remember Rory from Doctor Who? Mm-hmm. He's in it.
Right.
I forgot he existed.
So did I, until you mentioned him just
then. And I was like, wow, what a great thing. But yeah, definitely worth a watch. And if you want to remember some basically dead British actors...
There you go.
Go watch it.
Yeah,
mad.
I've still not seen the extra episode, so I don't know.
The cat one's worth a miss, to be honest. It's kind of like one of those things where it's like, wow, okay, cool. Like, animals can also dream if they try hard enough.
Yeah.
And it made Clara cry, which I found a little bit funny, because she loves cats. And one of the first scenes is one of the cats trying to tell the story of how she dreamed.
Right.
And the reason that she finally dreams is because she wanted to dream of the downfall of humans.
Oh, okay.
Purely because she didn't have purebred kittens.
Right.
So the dude... I'm laughing at this. This is messed up, and you're laughing at this, and you don't know what's going to come out of my mouth. The guy gets all the kittens, puts a brick in a sack, ties it up, and throws it in a river.
Wow.
So they're all dead, and then it obviously goes... She tells the thing about how she then met the Sandman.
Yeah.
And it goes from there.
Right.
Anyway, that's enough of that. We could talk more of this later on.
So, we're doing the first book, which is called Preludes Nocturnes. When it started, it was a DC comic. Vertigo didn't come in until later on. It later became a Vertigo title. Vertigo's really, really important. We'll talk about it loads because we'll probably do a bunch of Vertigo books. But it's like... DC needed a way to get around the Comics Code Authority that looked after it, and so their way of doing it was to create a new publication that was specifically for adults, which meant that the Comics Code had like no jurisdiction, because their whole thing was there was the whole issue where they thought comics were like messing with kids' brains. You know, it's like the whole thing.
Yeah,
video games is doing this.
Yeah,
and then
you mentioned this on the start.
Music is corrupting kids. Comics was the like thing for a while, so then they brought in the Comics Code Authority and stuff. So DC were like, we're just going to start a new publication that's specifically for adults, and that way you don't have any say over what we choose to do. And Sandman like really helped that take off, because Sandman was a DC book and it did really well, and then Vertigo was like a no-brainer for them. Also, Vertigo kind of came around because they started hiring certain writers. Like, around the 80s is when you get people that start to write, like, darker stuff. Like, I don't know why a lot of them are from the UK, but they just are. Like, Alan Moore, Grant Morrison, Neil Gaiman. Like, they all just like start getting really big in comics, and then they just like push that like really far. But this is Neil Gaiman's first like real big project. Like at this point, he had mostly been doing miniseries. This was his first comic that would come out monthly issues, and what's crazy is, right,
I've got this guy mixed out with Ian Rankin, who's another British author, but Ian Rankin doesn't do comics.
right,
There you go. He just does really dumb, like, crime mystery,
Right.
murder mystery stuff. So I was thinking, oh wow, Neil Gaiman does do a lot. I mean, he still does loads, because I mean, he even directed and stuff, but
yeah,
as also on the front cover, he's also author of American Gods, which is now a show.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's done now, or I don't know. I don't
know
it.
either.
And Coraline,
Yeah,
which is a big one for me because I fucking love Coraline.
I don't know how close the comic is to.
I
what
can't
happens in the
imagine
movies.
it's anywhere near right.
I can't imagine it is either. I've never read it, but love the movie, so we'll probably check it out at some point. What's crazy about this first thing, but I think there's a lot of parallels between the way that the comic was like responded to. There's a lot of parallels between that and the way that the series has been reacted to, in that people regard this first book as the worst book in the 10 Sandman books. I think there's like 75 issues in total, and then they're split up into like 10 chapters. People say this is probably the worst one just because it takes a bit of time to get going, which when we watched the series and I was like, oh, how are you finding it? And you were a few episodes in at this point, and you were like, I don't really know what's going on. But then once you get to like the midpoint of the series, which for us is kind of towards the end of Preludes and Nocturnes, is when it really starts, like everything starts falling into place, and you're like, I get what the series is now. It's like, because for the first like few episodes you're like, but what is the series? Like, where does this go? Kind of thing, right?
Yeah, because, I mean, especially in the series, the Sandman has 4 or 5 names.
Yeah.
So he's called the Sandman, he's Morpheus, he's Dream, and then he's like the God of the Dreaming, or Lord of the Dreaming, and you're just like, are these the same guy? And then you get to like the 3rd episode and go, yeah, these are the same guy, just different people, different names, I guess.
A thing to point out about the book is that the artists change a lot. Not so much in this first one, but throughout the course of the Sandman, it changes a lot, because it's mostly because at the start the artists couldn't keep up with how fast he was writing, and then it kind of became a bit of a blessing that he could be like, I can pick certain artists to tell certain stories, and so you end up with like kind of like a little bit of an anthology feel where you get like a different artist per story, which works perfectly, I think. But yeah, it's not like on purpose, but it kind of does become that eventually.
Yeah, see, there's 4 artists attached to this.
Exactly.
That's a lot
Yeah.
for like a comic.
Yeah. It was originally this book was pitched to him before he'd come up with any idea about it. It was pitched to him because he wanted to write about... There's a few characters called the Sandman in comics already, and he was like, I want to write a Sandman book. And they were like, well, you could do this thing. And he was like, I want to use one of those characters. And they were like, no, don't. And so eventually he started the whole thing. The whole thing started with this one image he had in his mind, which was, I suppose it's probably like the definitive Sandman image, which is him in the glass cage and breaking out. And he had that image of like this real pale, like skinny but really muscly guy with long black hair, and he was like, maybe I could just create a character, and then all of that comes from there, which is pretty insane.
Just a big thing as well, this is not Spider-Man Sandman.
No.
Because I remember seeing this book on your floor when I came around like months ago, and I was like, Sandman has a book? Wow, he must have a film coming out soon. But no, it's nothing to do with Spider-Man and Sandman. No. Thank God.
Another important thing to point out is that, like I said, it's 75 issues in total. And when, around the halfway point, Neil Gaiman started to come out in like media and say that he didn't want anyone to continue the Sandman after he left, which doesn't happen in comics, right? Like, as soon as a writer leaves a project, someone else takes over, right? It's like a soap opera. It just keeps going. But when he was done with the Sandman story, they let it go. They were like, nope, no one else can touch this. So it does have a start and an end. He's added to it since. There's like Sandman spin-offs and stuff like that. But the core 75 issues, start, middle, end, like, done. So it is his story through and through.
I think that's the thing with a lot of Neil Gaiman stuff, though, because I think it's just the respect that people must have for him. Because he's done loads of stuff, even actual books, where he will then just be like, okay, we're just going to stop this here. And then even the publisher's just like, okay, all right.
Yeah.
Like, you do you, because we know that like a couple of months down the line, you're going to bring out a completely different book, and that's going to absolutely slap as well.
Yeah.
So I have massive respect for him personally.
Yeah, I mean, the respect for Neil Gaiman. Like, I mean, this is a conversation I've had with quite a few people who have watched the series who have never read the comic, and I'm like, you could watch that series and it feels so new. Like, some of the ideas, you're like, I've never seen that happen before in fantasy. Like, that's a really new thing. But he wrote it like 30 years ago, and still no one has like taken some of these, like sure, a little bit here and there, but a lot of what he does is still like, when you watch the series, you're still like, this feels new, like, even though it was written 30 years ago, which is pretty crazy.
I mean, one of the things that going to where some people may have taken it from, I got massive Inception vibes from one of the episodes. You know, where, well, it's not really spoiling a bit if. There is a bit. I
mean, we're going to talk about the first half of the series anyway.
Yeah. There's someone called... Oh, what's she called? She's called the Vortex. So one person is born, and they have a potential to become a vortex, which could then change the dreaming into the real world, and everything gets all basically fucked. And when she's walking through it and learning, it just gave me vibes of the James McAvoy with... thingy in Inception, and basically talking him through how in the Inceptions work.
You mean Joseph Gordon-Levitt?
That's the one.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh, that's weird. And I was just thinking, wait, this came out like so long ago, and Inception came out like 2008ish.
Yeah.
And it must, like, there's no way it didn't take.
I think that there's probably like so many things that have been inspired by Sandman, if not drawn directly from it, but just the way the storytelling works. Like, I don't know if there's another comic out there that will reference a character and not make a big deal out of it. It'll just which is why the series is a little bit like confusing. It'll just like mention a character by name, and then issues and issue. Like, if you think one issue comes out every month, you could be waiting a whole year, and then another, and then they mention that character again. And, like, if you don't remember, then you're just like...
they'll mention someone and to make someone else's story go further, or just, like, tell you more about the Sandman himself. Be like, okay, he's changing a little bit emotionally. You won't hear about that character for the rest of the series. You just won't. And you'll be like, why? Why have you done this?
Yeah.
But, yeah, I'm excited.
I'm kind of gonna, like, usually, obviously, when we do these episodes, they don't have a, like-for-like visual version, so I've got to explain everything because you won't have seen it before. But I feel like most people who listen to this will have watched the series anyway. So...
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to be able to follow like-for-like anyway, because this is a thick book.
Yeah.
So I'll try and flick here and there. But...
Yeah. It's more just so you get the visual so that you can match it up to, like, what they do in the show kind of thing, right?
I mean, it is very sexy illustrations. I wouldn't say that much.
So I'm not going to go, like, as in-depth of what we would usually do, but I'll still cover the main, like, plot points so that we can talk about how they did it in the show kind of thing. Like, it's so similar to the show, but there are little differences, which we'll talk about. But it starts in 1916, Dr. Hathaway arriving at the door of Roderick Burgess. Dr. Hathaway's son has died in World War One. He's a librarian. He has this book, which Roderick Burgess needs, because Roderick Burgess is trying to summon death because he wants immortality. And he tells Dr. Hathaway, if you give me this book, I can summon death and I can bring back your son. They do the ritual. It doesn't work. They realise that they've captured something, but it's not death. and there you have Dream captured in that spherical. It's a cage, but it has magic circle protections around it so that he can't break out of it. And his son eventually works out that it's Dream of the Endless by flicking through old books. And whilst Dream is captured, because he is the god of the dreaming, the sleeping sickness starts to happen in the world. There are pages and pages of... It's kind of like bookends. It'll tell you a little bit of what's happening with Roderick Burgess and Morpheus, or Dream. That's just one of his many names. And then it'll go back to what's happening with the people in the sleeping sickness to show you what's happening over time. So
I think the series follows that very well as well.
Yeah. So there's one person who wakes up every few years, and every time that she does, she still thinks she's a kid. There's a guy who is a World War One soldier who's traumatized and he can never sleep because of the sleeping sickness. There are people who can't ever wake up. There is Unity Kincaid, who eventually becomes a character in the second book, who is asleep for the whole time. And while she is asleep, she is raped and has a kid. Her parents pass away, so they put her in a home because they don't know what to do with her, because Dream is imprisoned for a long time, so this sleeping sickness goes on for a long time. And I think in the comic as well, you get some cool DC stuff where it shows you how the DC universe is affected by all of this, because this does happen in the DC world. So, like, Justice League characters show up in this book, which obviously you don't have in the show. But, you know, that makes sense.
Yeah, you got Batman, you got... I think that's Green Lantern.
Yeah.
But then you've also got John Constantine.
So as the years go on, Roderick's getting really old at this point. His right-hand man, his right-hand man wasn't in the show. I don't think, anyway. But his right-hand man runs away with his mistress. His mistress was in the show. Or was it his wife in the show who runs away?
It's a mistress because he doesn't have a wife at that point.
So in the comic, he has a right-hand man and he runs away with the mistress. They take all of Dream's stuff with them. The guy trades the helmet for the protective amulet with a demon, which is how the demon ends up getting the helmet. Eventually, the mistress steals the amulet from him and runs away. And because Roderick Burgess has put a curse on him, because he's obviously like fuming that he's run away with his mistress and with all of Morpheus's stuff, he puts a curse on him, so as soon as the amulet gets taken off of him, his head explodes.
Yeah, so those pictures.
Yep. So Roderick Burgess dies in 1947. You would expect his kid to have some kind of different response, but no, he goes to Morpheus and he's like, same deal. I will free you if you tell me how to be immortal. And Morpheus, I think this is the first time Morpheus speaks to them, he just says no. I mean, come on, man. Like, you've grown up your whole life seeing that it didn't work for your dad, and then you're like, my dad, like, he was real nasty to you, but, you know, cut me the same deal and we'll let you go. Like, come on, man.
It's worth a shot, though, isn't it?
I guess.
Maybe
for like a day, and then I'd be like, alright, this ain't working. But also, he's like, if I let him out, what's the chances he's going to kill me anyway? Like, even if I show empathy now, he's probably still going to kill me.
Yeah, if you leave it a day, yeah.
Yeah. So, again, we've kind of fast-forwarded along. I should point out real quick as well, before we get into talking about what happens next. In between every chapter, you get the original cover art, which is what this is. So these are the original... When the books first came out, these were the original issue covers, which I'm sure if people are Sandman fans, they would have seen them because it's kind of like the definitive Sandman art. Because obviously they did new art for these collected editions, but these are the original issue covers that are these like, they're kind of like collages with like you get like photos of stuff and then paintings and then stencil stuff. Like, it's crazy. And like the art still looks like weird today. Like, I've still never seen anything like it. It's weird. But anyway, 1988 we're in now. Alex, Roderick Burgess' son, is also getting old. And then one of the guards guarding Morpheus falls asleep. Roderick's wheelchair had broken the magic circle, like in the show. Morpheus pretends like he's collapsed or something, and they come and let him out, which is so stupid. But as soon as they do, he sends them all to sleep. I don't remember if he does this in the show. In the book, it's quite a funny set of panels. He goes through their dreams and just starts eating all of the food in their dreams because he's so hungry. Yeah.
Yeah, because I remember in the show he just one of them was dreaming about a beach, right? Yeah, so he's just like butt naked on the beach.
Yeah. So he starts to get his powers back basically by eating and stuff. And then he goes to Alex Burgess in his dream, where Alex is a kid again. And Alex is instantly like, I'm so sorry, we should have let you out, please don't hurt me. And Dream kind of is like, you've screwed so many things up, you don't even know. And puts him in an eternal state of nightmare. So when he wakes up from a nightmare, he's in another one straight away. And so that is... Ideal. Yeah, but I mean, I remember reading this for the first time and being like, wow, that is really brutal. And then when you, like, follow Morpheus for the next few, like, chapters, you're like, oh, he really did cause a lot of damage by not letting him out. So, like, the amount of, like, suffering he's put other people through by trapping Morpheus for so long, you're like, yeah, no, he really did mess things up. So as soon as he's done that, Morpheus goes back to the dreaming, where we meet Cain and Abel for the first time, who I thought were great in the show. They were so much fun. They're very different here, as you can see.
They're pretty funny looking here.
The reason they're different here is because they're from another DC series that Neil Gaiman was just like, yeah, you'll fit in my Sandman universe, you come here. They were basically like you know, the Crypt Keeper? They were basically like that. DC had like a series which was like little horror short stories, and they were like the like narrators. Like, so they would like start the issue by like telling you about it and then being like, here's a ghostly tale for you, and then like then it would tell you the story, and then it would go back to Cain and Abel kind of thing. They were like hosts.
More like the Muppets, you know, the old man in the Muppets.
Yeah, a little bit. I guess so. But I mean, Cain and Abel speaks for itself, really. Lucien is another. It's in the book. It's Lucien, not Lucien, because it's a guy. And he was also in that series where he was the keeper of the library, and so like they'd be like, "Here's a scary story to tell you from Lucien's library." So, again, same deal. They just transferred him over into this universe. So then, I suppose we should talk about. That's pretty much the first two episodes, if I remember right. The first episode is all of the Roderick Burgess, Charles Dance stuff.
The second is
when he goes back to the Dreamer. You meet Cain and Abel. And you get like that whole. You meet Lucien for the first time, and he's like, "All right, my world is screwed now because I've been away for so long." And then you kind of end the episode with him being like, "Right, I need my three things back. I need my helmet, I need my gem, and I need my sand."
And he knows where to get them, but
because he speaks to the Fates, right? Yeah. So he speaks to them. They're called a bunch of different things because they change what they look like and they change their names all the time. So every time you meet them in the comics, they're different. But yeah, you can only ask 3 questions. So he's always like, "Where's my helmet?" And they're like, "A demon has it." And he's like, "Which demon?" And they're like, "Nope, can't tell you." And then he's like, oh. It's so frustrating.
God, those guys.
Luckily, there's only 3 items I need. Otherwise, this would be horrific. But then you kind of get... The comic follows the series exactly, where like, you know how the series splits it up into 3 episodes where he goes after one, then the next, and the other. It follows the same exact structure. So the first one starts with John Constantine and the Sand. Obviously, in the series, it's really different because they have Joanna Constantine.
Yeah.
So it changes the dynamic as well, because it's the same thing where they tell the Fates tell him that John or Joanna Constantine has it. I don't know if I've been saying it wrong the whole time, but the series they say Constantine, right?
It is Constantine.
I know, it sounds so wrong. I think it's just because I've always said Constantine.
I think the thing is with this character, it's Constantine, but everyone refers to, and it's like some dumb history knowledge, there was the Constantine who was like that horrible Byzantine leader, right?
Yeah.
He wasn't a very nice man. And then he got invaded, so screw him.
Yeah.
Right? But yeah, that's John Constantine, which also, you haven't watched it, but the Constantine series.
Yeah, I've never watched it. Maybe I will for when we do our first John Constantine book,
I love it.
Neil Gaiman... no, I think Neil Gaiman's written a bit of it. Alan Moore has done some John Constantine stuff, which is like crazy.
That doesn't surprise me.
So
the magician's done something.
Yeah, so we'll do that.
He's
He's done it about a magician. Crazy. But yeah, we'll do some of that. But yeah, very similar story. He goes there. The one thing I like, which they kept in the series, is like when John Constantine is walking around and he keeps getting told by people that Sandman's coming for him, and he keeps hearing like music on the radio that will be to do with falling asleep or dreams, or like Mr. Sandman the song, stuff like that. So he's like, so then when he opens the door and Dream's there, he's like, hello. And he eventually finds out that it's one of his ex-girlfriends who has it, so they need to go to her house. And when they get there, they get to the door and Dream's like, you can't come in, this place is messed up, I don't know what's in here, but it's not good. And Constantine's like, yeah, whatever, I'm coming with you. And when they go in there, basically the ex-girlfriend has become addicted to dreams. I remember in the show they don't really spend too much time on this, because you remember in the show they get they have the scene in the church with Joanna Constantine,
yeah,
with the guy where he has like the demon coming out of him. None of that is in the book, but I think that's because if you're reading this book, you will be familiar with the character of Constantine before, because he was in Alan Moore's Swamp Thing and then in his own books. Also, so they don't need to establish the character. I
imagine, especially with this series anyway, they focus heavily on Morpheus. It's literally, the whole series is, even though it's called The Sandman, obviously you'll have stuff, everyone's watched other series where it's called someone's name, but it will go into different characters.
Yeah.
Whereas I think with The Sandman, it's heavily on Morpheus and how his whole structure in his head changes from, obviously it's been, 200, 300 years, he's been gone.
Yeah.
And now he's getting back into this world where everything's fucked. And he needs to then fix it.
Yeah, I would say the comic still follows that to an extent, but...
Also, I think Constantine's very... From how he's portrayed in comics, because that's the only thing that I have read comic-wise, is some Constantine stuff. Because obviously he has his own thing, and some people may just know him as Keanu Reeves from the film.
Yeah.
Which is... I mean, I like that film, but that's not Constantine.
There's a guy who drives him round when they're like, oh, we need to go to the ex-girlfriend's house. His friend drives him around, and his friend in the movie is played by Shia LaBeouf. That's about all I know about that movie. I've not watched that film in that long time.
But he's meant to be like a really cocky guy, right? He's meant to be cocky, he knows everything.
Yeah.
He knows how to defeat demons, that's his thing. So I think it's not something you really want to force into the Sandman, right?
Yeah, I feel like they did. It's a little bit... I think this bit is really good in the comic, and in the show it was quite good, but it was quite a short episode as well.
Don't go too... Yeah, it was like half hour instead of...
But it is quite brief in the comic as well. I'm not saying it takes that much time, but essentially she's become addicted to the sand and addicted to dreaming, and that has caused it to overfill. Like, there's the bit that you just went through where they're going through that hallway and it's like covered in like... It looks like flesh, and Constantine's like, what is this? And he's like, this is dreams, but it also might be the remains of her father. And you're like, oh. And then they find her, and she looks like she's nearly a corpse. And Dream's like, cool, thank you, there it is, bye. And Constantine's like, no, come on, man, you can't leave her like that. This is your fault that she has this, and she's become like this. So Dream's like, fine, whatever, and he gives her one last like happy dream where it's her and Constantine together, and that's it, and then she dies, and that's the last that you see of John Constantine for now, which I guess is another reason why they didn't spend too much time on it, because you don't want people to get too attached to Joanna Constantine and then be like, she doesn't show up for the rest of the series. Which, like, I remember like people who have watched it without reading the comic and they're like, I really liked her, and I'm like, yeah, you won't see her again.
That was the one thing
which does kind of suck.
But obviously, going through this, they gender change quite a few characters.
Yeah,
but there's never a chance where I go, oh, that's wrong at all.
Yeah,
like, don't get me wrong, we're not the type of people to go up in arms about like, here's something topical, like a black Ariel. Oh no! Oh, what a shame.
Oh,
she's
man.
A fish person. But like, even with Constantine, I was like, oh, it's John Constantine. And then again, is another Doctor Who actor, ex-Doctor Who actor, who came out and again was just mad. So,
yeah. We're going to talk about this, I feel like a lot of intervals when we talk about the Sandman, but my god, the casting of the Sandman show was insane. Like, it took them, like, it explains why it took them like 2.5 years to cast everyone, but like there wasn't a single person in that show that I was like, they could have done better. I thought everyone was so good.
No, especially, I think we're kind of going to come on to him very soon. But
so I suppose we talk about this now. That's probably the biggest change between the comic and the first series of the show, is that you don't meet the Corinthian in the first book.
Do you not?
No.
Oh, there I was thinking I knew something.
Maybe you do, but you don't. He doesn't properly become a part of the story until the second book, which is called The Doll's House, which is when you get the Unity Kincaid stuff. That's when you get the whole Dream Vortex stuff. It's that second book. So, yeah, they put the Corinthian in quite early. I think they wanted to give the show a main villain kind of to follow, because you follow him right from the start, right? And so you kind of get to know him a little bit at the start, and then eventually he becomes like the main villain, kind of.
I mean, even with it, he's not really a villain, in a sense. I feel like all the bad people in this, they're not villains to a sense.
Yeah.
They're misunderstood.
Yeah.
Which then, obviously, at the whole end of the series, you kind of then go, you know, they were bad. I mean, the Corinthian's literally a nightmare. That's his whole point.
Yeah.
But but you kind of like see his side.
Yeah.
Where you're like, you're buggered. But looking at this, it looks like it's going to go to somewhere else, which is episode 3, I believe, where he goes to the demon world, right?
Yeah. So he has to go get the helmet from hell. He spends quite a lot of time getting there, which they didn't do too much of in the show, I don't think, but there's a demon at the gate who gives him a really hard time. Eventually he gets walked to where he needs to get by that demon, who is Etrigan. He's a character that shows up a lot in DC. He's in Swamp Thing as well, so it's kind of the crossing of those.
He's pretty funny looking, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, we'll get to know Etrigan the demon in other books, but he's a cool character. They get there. They go past these like cells where people are being held, and there's a person in there who particularly like calls out to Morpheus and confesses that she loves him. And I should point out as well, you'll see there that he looks different. Depending on who you are, you see Dream differently based on like what your perception would be, kind of thing, if that makes sense. Like different cultures.
Yeah,
so,
going on from where we mentioned earlier, where the first couple of episodes you get confused.
Yeah,
that was definitely a part where it's not explained at all, but he just turns into like I think it's like an African tribesman, right?
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, this bit is in the show. Yeah, that's literally that bit. Yeah.
And you look at it, you're going, I didn't know he could turn into African tribesman. Wait, what's this? Is this a power
this is
he
what
has?
I mean about how like the movie, the series rather, is difficult to do because there are parts of the Sandman that only work as a comic, where you can reference something and then like months later you can reference it again and be like, oh, remember that panel from that? This is how this connects. Whereas in a TV show you're like, oh man, I watched that first season like a year ago. I don't know what this means. But yeah, that all comes up in I think the second book. But yeah, that woman clearly has a connection with him at some point, but Morpheus kind of just ignores her and is like, whatever. So he goes to talk to Lucifer, who in the comic is like Tilda Swinton if she played David Bowie.
That's the shout, actually. Yeah.
Like, she looks because Lucifer in this is a he, is
he a dude in this?
Insanely close to both Tilda Swinton and David Bowie. Like, insanely close. If you told me that was either person, I would believe you.
Yeah, I was looking going, I swear I know it. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so obviously they changed Lucifer's gender as well, but I don't know who would ever care about the gender of Lucifer, and also Gwendolyn Christie deserves more roles. So
I've never known her name. All I know her name as Brianna Toth.
Yeah, Gwendolyn Christie.
That's it. That's a pretty cool name.
Yeah,
but
and she's great.
No, she's still Brianna Tarth. That's what she is. She's a great actress, though.
So Hell, they do allude to this in the TV show. Do you remember there's those like faces in like a rift that she talks to? They're like little tiny faces. You can only see their teeth and their eyes, and they're in like a scratch in the wall.
It's in the very last episode.
In the thing? Yeah. In the start of the book,
of Hell, right?
Yeah, they tell you about how, like, because Dream's talking to Lucifer and he's like, I need you to do this. And Lucifer's like, well, it's not up to me. And he's like, what do you mean? You're Lucifer Morningstar. You rule hell. And he's like, not anymore. I don't know if they explain why, but now there are 3 leaders of hell and Lucifer has to, like, be part of a little government of hell. So they have Azazel and Beelzebub as well, who also run hell. One of them is a big fly. One of them is like a triangle demon, which I guess that one is the face scar thing that you see in the series. But you never see the big bug. But, you know.
He's a very weird looking bug, though. Because he's like he's a fly's head.
Oh man, I think it might be the next page where you first see the demon that has his helmet. Oh no, this is just a shot of some funny looking demons.
The way to put the fly is from your hips. If you put a big fly head on there, that's that. Yeah. So you still have an ass, you still have legs, and then you have really long clown feet. Very stupid looking.
Yeah.
But then again, look at the rest of these demons. He's not the worst looking.
No. So they summon all of the demons. Oh, that's the demon.
Wow. Okay.
So they summon all of the demons. Morpheus uses his sand to find the demon that has his helmet. And he's like, well, give it back, it's mine. And the demon's like, no, I traded it fairly. So we'll have to have a fight. And Dream, the whole time he's in hell, is really worried. Because Lucifer and him do not get on. And he doesn't have all of his tools or his power. So he's like, I'm pretty weak.
Yeah.
But this demon who... I can't remember what the demon looks like in the show.
He looks like a demon in the show.
Yeah,
like an
in this
demon.
he looks like a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles villain.
Yeah, he does. Big pink starburst looking guy.
Yeah, he looks ridiculous. And also in the show they have him and Lucifer do the fight. I say the fight. You know, it's really hard to describe if people haven't seen the show.
The dumbest... It sounds dumb, but I'm floating to it.
Okay.
They challenge themselves to a word battle.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I was going to say.
It sounds stupid, but it's the closest you can put it to.
Like, for an example, they go back and forth. So one of them says, I'm a wolf, and then the next one says, well, I'm a hunter. And they take it in turns to up each other. Like, in the show, they have Morpheus do it with Lucifer. I think probably just to give Gwendoline Christie a bit more to do, and she does it really well, so that's fine. Whereas in the book, it's him versus that demon. Which, again, same way as it happens in the show, it ends with Dream saying that he's a universe. The demon says, well, I'm anti-life, and then Dream says that he is hope, and the demon's like, oh man, I didn't think about that. And so the demon is, like, taken by these angel babies and they like torture him or something.
Yeah, they wrap him up and just take him away.
Yeah.
What? Okay.
Because he lost. I don't know.
I mean, yeah.
He did lose.
He didn't win, I'll tell you that.
So Lucifer's like, okay, well, where are you going? Because you do realise you're in hell now and we could just kill you, Morpheus. And that, I think Lucifer specifically says, what use are dreams in hell? And Morpheus says, what use does your torture have if the people who are going through it do not dream of heaven at some point? And then the crowd just like parts and he just walks right through. Which I think they did in the series as well, which is a cool moment. Also the visuals for like when they were in hell looked insane.
So good.
The visuals like all over the place.
It made sense that show cost so bloody much. Like,
yes. So now we get to the final item, the amulet. Fair enough.
Sorry.
And this is when the series and the book both get really dark. And and the horror stuff really starts to come in. So this is what you'll notice, again, a really big change from the comic compared to the show. This is where we meet John Dee, who in the series is played brilliantly by David Thewlis. In the book, he is basically a corpse. Like,
yeah.
He's really creepy. He gets creepier looking as he gets more power, but he doesn't. Yeah, he's not like remotely human anymore. Whereas in the show, he's just a creepy dude.
Yeah, the way I have to put it to idiots like myself, who you mentioned his name, no one really knows him. Isn't he? Is he Lupin?
Mm-hmm.
He's Lupin in Harry Potter. Just FYI.
He's also. I've mentioned this to you before, and you were like, "Well, I don't know." But he's also Ares in Wonder Woman. But a lot of people won't recognise him because he's like a big CG man.
I mean, yeah.
He doesn't start as that, but yeah, my God. So I think this is where the book really picks up. This is where you were like, wow, the series is so good as well. We meet John Dee in Arkham Asylum. John Dee is the son of Roderick Burgess's mistress. She gives John the protective amulet that she stole from Roderick Burgess all those years ago, and John escapes Arkham. As he escapes Arkham, he bumps into the Scarecrow, who was the creepy-looking dude in the straitjacket, who has decided to hang himself for fun, but he's still alive because he's the Scarecrow. And he's like, "I'll see you soon," because everyone always comes back to Arkham at some point. Literally the same in the show, a little bit different like beats, but same kind of thing where John Dee forces a woman to pull over. In this, he threatens her with a gun, and she immediately is like, "My boyfriend's in a gang," and he's like, "I don't care, drive me to this place." And then eventually the woman starts to feel kind of sympathetic towards him because he starts talking about his life and stuff and his own issues, and then as soon as he mentions killing someone, it just like changes instantly. The mood changes, and she's like, "Why am I doing this? I need to get out of this car, but I need to drive him to this place." When they eventually get to the place, he asks her whether her boyfriend is actually in a gang, and she says no. She just felt threatened, and he's like, "It wouldn't have mattered anyway," and then shoots her. Okay, so let me explain this page.
I'm so happy.
I knew you'd be really happy when we get to this part. In the comic, the amulet that Dream has is used in it, not the amulet, the stone is used in a battle. So John Dee in comics is a character called Dr. Destiny. Obviously in the Sandman, they don't really... I think they might say Dr. Destiny, but
he is mentioned here where they call him Dr. Destiny as like a... Victor Von Doom.
Yeah, in the show, they just cut all that out because you don't... there's no Justice League. None of that matters. But in comics, he is an actual villain, and they captured the ruby from him, and they kept it in a storage facility that the Justice League use. So Morpheus goes to the Justice League. The only person who happens to be awake at that time is Mr. Miracle, and he's like, "I don't know how to help. I'm not a big member of the Justice League. I can't help you. But I know someone who was there at the space station who can probably help you." And they go to Martian Manhunter's apartment. Who, when he opens the door, he sees the Manhunter, God of Dreams, who is terrifying. And he's like, "Yes, I will help."
He's like a big flamey monster.
Yeah. So Manhunter tells Dream where the stone is, and Morpheus goes to get it. He ends up getting there first, and like in the show, when he touches it, because John Dee has kind of corrupted it, it sucks in some of his power and knocks him out, which means that when John Dee gets there, he's like, "Oh, it's here, and you've made it powerful. Cool, thank you," and he just leaves. Because I don't know whether he sees Morpheus or whether he just doesn't see him, but he's like, "Oh, it's more powerful than I remember. Cool. All right." And then we get to the best episode of the series, and probably the best issue of this. Definitely the best issue. I don't know, the next issue is really good. But one of the best issues of the Sandman, which is the diner issue. Where there's a ticking clock, it constantly tells you what the time is, and just like the episode in the show, it takes place over 24 hours with John Dee sat in this diner with all these random people. So for the first few hours, we get what happens in the show, where you get to meet all the people in the diner. It's just John Dee just sat there learning about them. There's Betty, who's the diner cook, who writes stories about the people who come in. There's a girl called Judy, who's in a relationship, but the other girl's mother doesn't approve, and they were supposed to meet up, but she hasn't shown up. There's the couple from the show. There's the guy who's having the job interview. In the book, there's a trucker, but in the show, he was the chef who's having the affair with Betty, who is like the person who serves them. But like in the show, it's the chef who she's having an affair with, and then in this, it's just like a trucker who comes in all the time. And he kind of just sits and observes them. Again, he looks terrifying at this point. So like, I don't know why he's allowed to just sit in this diner, but whatever. It makes a little bit more sense in the show, because he just seems like a bit of a slightly odd old guy, but in this he is terrifying. But every time one of them tries to leave, he keeps them from leaving, and eventually he starts to mess with things using his powers, to see how they'll react, and also to see whether truly they're good people or not, if he gives them certain dreams. So he starts to just mess with things. Like, he makes them fight each other, then he makes them try and amuse him, then he makes them, like, worship him, and that's where things start getting real crazy. They start cutting their fingers off in, like, devotion to him and giving them to him. And it just spirals hour by hour, and every now and then it'll tell you that it's been another hour, and things get crazy. They all sit and watch TV for a bit, he gets to know all about them, then they have an orgy all together. Then a big turning point is he gives them back their sanity and lets them remember everything that's happened. And so they're just freaking out for like an hour, and he just watches, and then he's like, I'm bored now. Turns the lights off at hour 16, and they start to murder each other. Hour 17, they start to punish each other. Hour 18, he turns them all into animals. Hour 19, he starts to blind a few of them. By hour 20, they're either dead because they've killed themselves or they've killed one another. So everyone in this diner is dead by this point. And then for the last few hours, John Dee just sits there and waits for Morpheus, because at the 24th hour, Morpheus finally arrives and confronts John Dee, which... it's a great issue, because it's like reading a thriller, you know, where you're like, I don't know what's going to happen next, and it's like, it's so tense. Reading that issue is like watching a thriller. Like, it's so good, and I think the series did a really good job, because I didn't know just how messed up they were going to go. I was like, man, when you're reading the book, you're like, this is like dark fantasy, and then you get to that, and you're like, whoa.
I mean, also the book is... they helpfully have these little hours in a square part. So you're going, okay, this is going to go on for quite some time. Whereas in the series, they just chuck that shit on you.
Yeah.
And just go, here's an episode which is going to be really dark and fucked. And you're just watching going, this has got none of the people I know apart from that dude.
Yeah.
And then you watch it more and more and you're like, oh shit.
For the first half an hour as well, it's like a real slow build where nothing happens. And then it's just like... then it all kicks off in the last like 10 minutes, and you're like, what?
I do not get why, but it's just amazingly done. And again, it's easily the best episode of the series.
Yeah, and it's a great, just like in terms of like legendary issues of comics, I think this one should be like right up there. It's so good. So the world is starting to feel the effects of John Dee using his powers as well. So Dream knows that he needs to intervene at this point. Kind of tries to reason with him, but he knows that he's going to have to fight him realistically. So Dream's like, come on man, just give me back the ruby. And John Dee's like, no, I'm just going to kill you instead because I have all your powers. I mean, obviously that doesn't work. But Morpheus at first tries to show John Dee a dream. And he's kind of buying it and kind of like seeing actually who he is and stuff instead of being this power crazy person. And he snaps out of it and he's like, no, I control the dreaming now. And he starts looking for Morpheus. They have a fight. He gets the upper hand. And eventually he decides, I know what I'll do. This ruby has part of you in it. So if I destroy the ruby, it'll kill you. Which, as far as villain plans go, is really dumb. Like, not dumb from a Neil Gaiman perspective. It makes sense why the character would do that, but dumb from John Dee's perspective, that he thinks that destroying the ruby would kill Morpheus. He destroys it, there's suddenly a void, and he's like, I did it. This is the dreaming. I'm Dream now. And then Morpheus shows up and is like, well, thank you for destroying the amulet, because you've returned all of my power to me. And then this kind of shows where Morpheus is at as a character at this point. You know what he did to Alex Burgess, where he makes him have the continuous nightmares?
Yeah.
With John Dee, he just has a conversation and then takes him back to Arkham. Because John Dee has done more horrific things to people, but it hasn't really impacted Morpheus at all, apart from that he's like, you've got my power, and you could become too dangerous, so I need to stop that. But he kind of just, like, is like, he kind of feels bad, and I think he's also, like, after the whole Constantine thing, he's like, this is kind of my fault. Like, if I wasn't captured, you would have never done any of this, because you wouldn't have the ruby in the first place.
It's like self-reflection in a way, right?
Yeah, which is kind of the whole first book, is him slowly starting to be like, maybe I shouldn't start to feel so hard done by, and maybe some of this I can actually solve myself, kind of thing. Which is mostly summed up in the last issue of the series, which was also the halfway point of the show, The Sound of Her Wings, when you get to see his relationship with his sister Death, and you get to see Morpheus in a different way, because he's just like, he's being real emo, and he's like, I don't know what to do, and I can't fix anything. And
Well, I don't know how the comic puts it, obviously, but the way the series puts it is, he basically has that existential crisis of, why am I the Lord of Dreaming?
Yeah.
Which, I mean, we've all had that. Obviously not the Lord of Dreaming, but like we all go, why are we here? So he just kind of goes, what? Why are we here? And then obviously when you speak to Death, you're going to have a pretty deep conversation. And in the series, she kind of goes, you think I want to be the Lord of Death? No. I literally people fear me and they fear death, but I have to lead them to it.
Yeah.
And she's done it for so long where she then kind of respects it. It's not she enslaves humanity, or like she forces humanity to work for her. It's the other way around. Humanity need her for them to move on and carry on, which is then Dream at the end of that episode just like, bruh.
Yeah. She's also like the most relatable character in the whole book, in that she actually likes, like you said, she actually likes humans and realizes that like there is more to this than like we are their masters, and that like I'm here to help and they're not here to help me, kind of thing. So he follows her around for the day because he's like, I don't know what else to do. I don't know what to do, man.
Might as well have it. Stop.
And you get all the same like story points that you get in the show, where
you have the musician.
Yeah, you get the old guy, you get the comedian, you get the baby, and then at the very end you get the young guy who she was talking with at the start, who then she says that she'll come back to, and they come back and he gets hit by a car. It's hard to really do that issue justice without getting people to read it. Obviously, you've seen the episode of the show, so it's easier because you get it. But like,
that's another one where I think the episode did it. Like, it did amazingly of how it's needing to tell that.
Because,
it's like a stopgap as well. So obviously you've had one of the most fucked things you've ever watched, and now you just need something to be like, can I just have a break? Can I just time out for a second? And that episode, and obviously the issue as well, is just like, okay, Morpheus has learned this much. He speaks to Death, who's this basically the way that the Lords work. They're basically sisters, they're siblings in a way.
Yeah.
Obviously to kind of get some guidance.
It's tough because like if you hadn't seen the show and I was describing it, you're like, oh, so he follows. Okay, so Death's his sister. He follows around. That's kind of cool and stuff. But like through watching the show, I think the show does an incredible job of translating what's great about that issue, in that it's just like, first of all, it feels really original. Still, despite that was written 30 years ago and that it's now just been turned into a TV show. But like,
you've seen Death kind of be portrayed as that more heartwarming figure,
Yeah.
but not to the point where you'll still at the end of that will still be like, I'm the god of death, like
Yeah.
I'm still the god. Whereas this, she goes, I'm not a god in a sense. I'm basically just helping people move on, and I'm basically not enslaved to them, but I work for them. I'm happy to work for them.
Yeah,
I'm here for humanity.
And she like doesn't enjoy it, but she does enjoy her job because she gets to like meet people and be like, look, you don't need to worry, it's fine, just come with me. Like, she likes helping people.
She sees as if she's not there, who else is going to guide them to the next
and
stage?
You get like literally like point after point of like things that should be like heartbreakingly sad to watch, but then like because of how she handles it, it's like a really nice moment when they're greeted by death and they can like look and see their body and they're like, wait a minute, and they figure out what's happened, and Death's like, don't worry, just come with me, and then you just hear her wings. Like, it's so well done in the show and so well done in the comic. Like
as I said to you, Clara, my other half, she has trouble just sitting and watching stuff. It's the most annoying thing going. But the canteen scene, she sat through and literally looked at me after going, fuck, and I was like, yeah. And then even this one, silence again, and every time Death said like a certain point or just even a line of dialogue, we both look at each other and go, oh, that's I don't want to be thinking, man. Like, this is depressing to a point.
Yeah.
But this is an episode where you can't give it justice.
No.
With the canteen scene, you can kind of explain it to a point, but this is one where either you read the actual part of the comic,
or just watch the episode.
And you can kind of understand what the hell we're on about.
Yeah,
like
I think it is.
When we put it on a pedestal.
I think it is just one of those things that I could never explain it as well as it like actually is.
Unless we audiobooked it.
Yeah.
And I'll be Death and you be Morpheus. There's no other way.
There's a really good audiobook of the Sandman.
Is it?
The Audible did a few years ago. It's got James McAvoy as Morpheus, and like the voice cast is insane. And it's really good. And people for ages were like, "This is the closest we will get to the Sandman being adapted." And then Netflix were like, "Hey, we got you."
So that's like the end of the first book.
That's the end of the first book. So yeah, pretty much half the series, right? Because I think that's the 5th or 6th episode is The Sound of Her Wings.
Yeah, because episode 4 is an entire episode of the canteen, and then episode 5, is...
So literally like half the show. It ends with it works perfectly, I think, as the end of a first book, but also as the end of the first half of a TV show, where it sets up the next part perfectly by kind of rounding it off with Dream being like, okay, I need to just actually do my job and make an impact myself and go and rebuild the dreaming, and he's motivated again, and he kind of like starts to have a thing where he's like, maybe I should start to feel more for humanity and stuff. And kind of the reason that you get that sets up the next book so perfectly with almost like a clean slate, like everything that's happened, okay, we've moved on, this is the next part, is because Neil Gaiman thought that the book would be cancelled after 8 issues.
I mean, his honesty.
Comic book companies at the time had a real trait of running things for around 8 issues, so nearly a year, so that
like a trial period, right?
If they cancelled them, it didn't look bad because they had let it run for like nearly a year.
They gave it its go.
Kind of thing, yeah.
Finally, they did that with the Flash in real life, but you know.
So they. That's why Neil Gaiman kind of rounds that first book off so cleanly and doesn't leave it on like a cliffhanger as such kind of thing. But yeah, like I said, interestingly, like the reviews of the Netflix show, the first book sold really well at the start, got a lot of attention, which I think the first episode of The Sandman, like when The Sandman initially dropped, people watched the first episode and they're like, I don't really get it, but it's real interesting. Next few episodes, a bit confusing. The comic started to drop off and not sell as well. And then when you got to issue 5, which is when the John Dee stuff starts to pick up, the series just started blowing up. So I think that happens with the Netflix show. I think you start it and you're like, wow, I don't know what's going on, but this world seems quite interesting. And then because the next few episodes are so like, they feel like so separate. Like you've got the Joanna Constantine one, and then the one with Hell, and then you eventually get to the John Dee stuff. By that point, you're like, all right, I get it now. Because at the start, you're like chasing his objects around, and you're like, but then what happens after this?
I think the negative of the Netflix show is it's not its own fault, and it's even the comic does it as well. Is you cannot rush it at all. But also, you need to lead up. You're creating a new universe, and the speed that they did it, even then, is still pretty fast for like creating just an entirely new universe of it. But I think episode 2 is probably the slowest. But as I would have to warn people, if you are going to watch the series, it's not something that you can just stick on in the background and just let it run, and you can do something else. We have a mate who he mentioned, oh, who is the Dreamin' and who's Morpheus? And we had to be like, you haven't been listening. No. And he was like, I'm on like episode 4, and we were like, no. If you're on episode 4 at this point, you just haven't been. And he was like, oh, I've been like playing stuff at the same time. It's like, no. You need to sit and watch. It's one of those. It's quite deep, but
yeah, massively.
But yeah, I mean, firstly, yeah, I love the artwork in this book, by the way.
Yeah, it's really cool. Like I said, we're going to do a bunch of like DC / Vertigo stuff, so we'll talk more about it maybe when we do some like more exclusive Vertigo stuff, because this was still DC at the time. But Sandman being the biggest book that Vertigo would have when it eventually became a thing, it did something for DC that hadn't been done in comics for a long time, which was to bring people in to comics who didn't know about comics before, because Sandman suddenly became like just a popular book for people to read. So suddenly you had people picking up comics that had never thought about buying comics before and stuff, which if you think about, like,
it seems similar to how superhero movies have got. So this obviously mixed. Firstly, people know the name Neil Gaiman. They're going to buy a book what's created by him anyway. But it does his dark, twisted stuff that he normally does anyway, but also in a visual novel, where he's done it to a point where, I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah. But that just proved, that was just huge for DC at the time, to be able to bring new people in. Like, I guess kind of in a similar way to, like, I've found it, obviously I wasn't around for when Sandman was coming out to experience this, but I've experienced it with the show, where I've had people talk to me about the Sandman who I never would have thought would have been interested in something like the Sandman, and they're like, I watched the first series, it's really good, and I'm like, that proves how great the Sandman is that you can make it into a Netflix show, despite the fact it's like dark, grand fantasy that's like just mental to even think about.
It's hard to get into, definitely.
And you can make it into a Netflix show, and I've had so many conversations with people who I'm like, I could never imagine you getting into the Sandman, but they watch the show and love it.
The big thing is, obviously, you mentioned James McAvoy did the audiobook. In the 11th episode, he does one of the voices for the 11th, the animated part as well. So he must have liked it, because otherwise you're not going to do an audiobook that you don't like, or just like, you can't really do an audiobook just for money, can you? Because that's taken ages. Like, that's going to take a while.
Yeah, I'm going to look up the cast real quick. But yeah, what was I going to say about that? They were supposed to make a movie of it a long time ago. Joseph Gordon-Levitt was attached as, like, in some capacity, whether he was going to be in it, but I think he was also a producer, and it never got made. I think he had some sort of creative differences with Neil Gaiman, and so they were like, let's not do it, kind of thing. Neil Gaiman was in talks to like turn it into a movie or a TV show back like when it first came out.
So like
it has been going on for a long time.
That as a movie would not work, like, at all.
Oh my God, no! No wonder. Yeah. So the cast of the audio drama, which I've only ever heard like a tiny little bit of, but it's really good. Neil Gaiman like narrates it, But yeah, you have James McAvoy as Morpheus. Just to start with, Kat Dennings plays Death. You've got Andy Serkis plays Matthew the Raven. Matthew the Raven isn't in the first book, but Patton Oswalt as Matthew the Raven.
So dumb.
Perfect.
So good, though.
Yeah. Riz Ahmed plays the Corinthian. Taron Egerton plays John Constantine. Reginald D. Hunter plays the Martian Manhunter.
Reginald D. Hunter? Isn't he the comedian?
Yeah, like you know the show, Neil Gaiman was like, how many British actors can I fit into this?
He did the same with
He
the
did
audio
the same
version.
thing with the audible version. Yeah. He was just like, all of you, come here. Yeah. There are so many... There's quite a lot of characters in the show, but my god, the book, there is countless. Did you know, by the way, I knew this going into the show, but when I watched it with my mum, and she didn't pick up on this the whole time, so I told her, and she was like, really? You know, Merv Pumpkinhead?
Yeah.
I don't need to tell you which character that is.
Clues in the name.
Yeah. Did you know that's Mark Hamill?
Yeah.
Crazy.
I heard it and I was like, no. So I had to look it up immediately, which I had to do for so many actors, because I was like, I know that person. Looked it up and I was like, yeah.
In the audio drama, it's Kevin Smith.
I thought you were going to say Spacey. I got really scared.
Oh my god,
Kevin Smith?
Yeah.
I mean, bloody hell. For Pumpkinhead being played by two legends. Like, bloody hell.
So there you go, that's Preludes and Nocturnes. You see what I mean about how I was like, it makes sense for us to cover the first series of the show, but if we do Preludes and Nocturnes and The Doll's House, my god.
That's going to be a long one, to say the least. We could do the next one next time, but...
We'll do it. We'll definitely do it close. Like, we won't leave it too long before we do The Doll's House. We'll definitely do it next few episodes. We won't do it for the next DC one, because next month is October, so we've got spooky...
Oh,
we got
spooky season,
episodes.
baby!
But we'll do it as soon as that ends. We'll do it. Well, we're really gonna put Flash off for like 2 months.
I mean, let's be honest. No one wants Flash anyway.
I don't even want to do it.
I can't imagine we're gonna have angry people coming in going,
the Flash.
"Where's his cosmic treadmill?"
Ain't nobody wanting the Flash right now.
Did I remember that right? Is it
You
cosmic
did.
treadmill?
It is the cosmic treadmill.
Oh yeah! What a stupid name that is. Still.
Yeah.
But
So we're doing spooky month.
I don't want any clues. No one needs any clues. It's spooky month, spooky season, spooky times.
Spooky Marvel is the next one, and then Spooky DC will be the one after that.
Spooky Marvel.
There's not a whole lot of
Spider-Man
Spooky Marvel. He's in it.
Yeah, crazy. Spiders. No one likes spiders.
There's not really a lot to do with spiders.
No?
There's no. I mean, apart from Spider-Man being in it, I suppose that's got quite a lot to do with spiders.
Yeah, he's literally the man of spiders.
The man of spiders.
Actually, that'd be way scarier.
There's got to be a comic called Spider-Man, Man of Spiders.
I don't want to read that one.
No.
Stay away from that one.
No.
Oh, I'm looking forward to spooky season.